So while we're waiting for people to start filtering in, what we will do is I will read some announcements for you all because I do unfortunately have announcements to make. So while we're waiting for the usual crowd to come in, oh, I accidentally forgot to mute a site there. So I was hearing myself 3 times. That was terrifying and horrible, and I hope to never experience that again. I was just going to say, I now have a YouTube for the old VODs. So if you missed the Wales stream or the first ever panel stream I did, you can catch that down below. There's a link there to the YouTube, so you should subscribe to that. And on Thursday next week, I'm going to be playing the new Hearts of Iron expansion. So I will be playing the Battle for the Bosphorus as Turkey, and I will be explaining to you all of the early Republican Turkish history that no one knows about, because it is ridiculous. You will be hearing about Kadroism and how Turkey almost formed an anti-imperialist front with the Soviet Union. That's cool. I thought that was cool. And Participation might be joining me on that one. Also, on Sunday next week, not this Sunday, next Sunday, I'm having the lads from Realpolitik on. We're going to be playing a special game where we delve into some dungeons, and we might even be stopping Brexit while we're down in the dungeon. That's all the clues you get about who our special guest is. I'm really excited for that one, even if it's going to be potentially the biggest waste of £9.99 in my life. Okay, so the announcement's out of the way. I'm going to hand it over to my guests to introduce themselves in the order they appear on the screen. So we'll start with Dan, and then we'll go across.
Hi, I'm Dan. I still live in Wales, and I run a left-wing podcast called Desolation Radio. Thank you for having me.
No worries. Go ahead.
Hiya, I'm Rhian. I'm originally from Tredegar in the South Wales Valleys, but I came to London for university, and I'm still here. So I'm basically an expatriate, but still got friends and family in the Valleys and Cardiff and Swansea. So I'm still invested in Wales.
Okay, Morgan, you're next on my screen.
Okay, I'm Morgan. I'm originally from Caerphilly. I'm a Labour activist. I'm now living in London, studying at UCL. But yeah, still very much tied down in Wales. So I have family there and the like.
Okay, and our last guest.
Yeah, hi. I'm Eli. I'm from Almanford, Swansea. That's 20 minutes off from Swansea. Got a pretty key interest in Labour history from that town. I'm a politics and contemporary history student at King's College London.
Right, so I'm getting a sense that we've got a lot of expatriates and people living in London, but they are all, I promise you, much more qualified than me to even approach any of the topics tonight. And given that I am, as I've written in my notes, the least Welsh man in the world. So I told the panel what the first question is because I know the rest of you are going to ask this question, but I'll explain how to ask questions actually. So you'll see at the bottom here, there's a strange coin with Tony Blair's face on it. You want to click on that, and there's a function called Ask a Question. So for example, Sinan, why are you so handsome? That's a question you could ask. I'm not sure how it's relevant to the topic, but you could ask that. I would be interested in asking it. But that's how you ask a question and actually get my attention, because otherwise I will lose it in the chat. And you don't want me to lose the question in the chat. So, first question, because I know the chat's going to immediately ask this of our panel. What do you think the chances are of Wales achieving independence at any point, but particularly in the next 10 or so years? So, Dan, we'll go from you again and then just go around. Oh. All right, we just lost the camera. Okay.
I'm still here, yeah.
Okay. All right. Dan, you want to go?
Yeah, I can go. How long have I got? I think
you've got
Wales
a couple
will
of minutes. Yeah.
I think Wales will be independent. I think, the breakup of the United Kingdom is inevitable. There's been a long crisis of the British state that's been accelerated now with Brexit, Scottish independence, bunch of other things. I think sort of Blairism was the last hurrah of the British state trying to hold it together. That's collapsed. So I don't know when it'll happen. I think what's probably more likely is that Scotland is going to leave very soon, and then that's going to be a catalyst for Wales to have to confront the issue of independence. Although, I mean, there is also a possibility that Wales could opt just to be completely absorbed and just live out this life as this sort of little rump area of England and become a bit like Cornwall or like Yorkshire. I think that's also like a negative possibility. Yeah, I think I mean, obviously, I'm pro-independence. I want it to happen. The sooner, the better. But I don't know whether we need to wait for like a specific catalyst. I mean, support for independence is growing exponentially. I think it's up to like 25%. Yeah, I'm not sure about the timeline or whether it's going to be something that just happens or whether it's sort of England kicks us out and just says like, you're like a drain on our resources, out you go. That's also a potential way of achieving independence, which would be like quite fitting, I think, like the least glamorous independence parade ever. It's just England has just said we don't want you anymore. Yeah, I think it's going to happen.
Okay. I was just going to say the reason I asked this question was because of a poll I saw that showed Wales had the lowest amount of independent support of any constituent part of the UK. England had higher independent support for England than Wales did for Wales, which was pretty impressive, although I don't know what the English want independence from, actually. That seems like a more interesting question. Maybe we'll do an England stream at some point and try and figure out what that is. Morgan, you're next on my screen, so yeah.
With regards to whether I think Wales will go independent, I genuinely don't know. I think it's like if we get to the point where we have an independence referendum, we're gonna have like one shot at independence in our lifetime. We cannot count on having the same situation as Scotland, where immediately following it they had a major constitutional crisis. We cannot be counting on things like that to happen. Whether I think it will happen, it's interesting because when I go back home for summer holidays and for Christmas and things like that now, when I go back to Ystrad Mynach, I'm seeing more and more Yes Cymru stickers going up around towns where I had never even seen like Labour posters like around election time coming up there before. I'm seeing people hanging Yes Cymru flags inside their like bedroom windows and such. So I think it shouldn't be underestimated that something is very much changing in the current, and if an independence campaign was ran in the right way, it very much could garner, with the right rhetoric and the right arguments, could very much get that 50% plus one support. On the other hand, it's also very possible that Wales is the last nation in the United Kingdom and still calls itself the UK, even if England decides that it doesn't want to be a colonising nation anymore. But I suppose that's a very long-winded answer of saying I don't really know.
That's good,
I certainly hope it does, but I don't know.
We like the long answers because they cover for how poorly prepared I am on the streams. I'm just kidding. I'm very well prepared. Everyone's seen my notes. I have actual notes, everyone. You'll know how unprecedented this is if you're a long-time follower. But yeah, I did sort of find it amusing, the idea of Wales as a sort of Kazakhstan holdout at the end of the Soviet Union, where they were just like, well, guess we're in charge.
Yeah, very, very much so. There's a very interesting, like, national lack of self-esteem that has like gripped Wales for like the longest time, and I think it's now recently not quite with Brexit. Like I think that was the start of it, but more with the process that followed it, and especially coronavirus. Now, I've said before that ironically how Welsh Labour being a unionist party. Ironically, how they've handled coronavirus has probably increased support for independence.
Okay, we'll come back to Welsh Labour and the Welsh Government and coronavirus. I've got questions on that, so we'll certainly come back to it. Rian, you're next on my screen, so please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I broadly agree, to be honest. I think, I mean, I'm assuming the options here are Welsh independence is very likely, quite likely, or not likely at all. Like, am I picking from those?
Basically, yeah.
I'm going to go for very likely, which isn't something that I'd ever expected to find myself saying, but I've been really surprised by the increase in popular support for it. I think it's useful to look at a couple of historical factors that are driving that. Like looking back at the two previous referendums on devolution, there was one in 1979 where devolution was decisively rejected by about 80% of the electorate. And then in 1997, you had the second referendum where the assembly was established, but again, really narrowly, like by just over 50% of the vote. So obviously between those 2 points, you had 18 years of Tory government and the effects that that had on Wales. So you can see why that might have shifted opinion about devolution, but it also clearly hadn't done so very decisively. Like, because I'm old as balls, I actually campaigned in the 97 referendum for yes votes. I thought Welsh Assembly was, as good an idea as anything else. But I was really struck by the lack of enthusiasm that I encountered when I was canvassing. And I wasn't clear then, I'm still not clear now, if the lack of enthusiasm was to do with a lack of enthusiasm about devolution itself, or whether it had to do with the particular offer that Wales had being quite uninspiring and toothless. It was like Scotland was being offered a parliament, and then it was like, oh, let's include Wales, let's give them a little assembly as well. So maybe a better offer that had tax raising powers from the start or something like that would have seen a higher yes vote. And there was also a lot of critiques about it just being like jobs for the boys. This will just be another layer of bureaucracy. It won't make any material difference to the massive problems that Wales has got. I've got to say, I find that critique quite valid 20 years on as well. That said, I think the factors that have been driving support for independence, one of them is Brexit, I think, both in the sense that we seem to be in an era that's quite volatile and people are prepared to make sort of like wild leaps of faith and risk constitutional upsets and that sort of thing. So I think it's possible that Wales could take its cue from Brexit. But also I think in a more negative sense, it's clear that Brexit is going to impact Wales particularly catastrophically. So we need to think of some way to insulate from the effects of that. So devolved powers or independence might be a way to go there. I think I'm going to wrap up with the fact that I think the new factor that I think is crucial here is that support has solidified for independence on the left and within the Labour grassroots, as well as in like Plaid and the sort of more nationalist wings of Welsh politics where you'd expect it to be. I think the emergence of this sort of pro-independence popular front has been decisive versus Welsh Conservatives and UKIP, or whatever they're called now, who've been calling to scrap devolution. So that's recent history as I see it. Hope that was helpful.
Yeah, that's good. Eli, you are last, and you have to follow everyone up, but please go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of the points have been said, but I'm in favour of Welsh independence. I'm a member of Yes Cymru. I think people are right in saying that support and appetite for independence has been increasing in recent times. I think Brexit is definitely one of those, but one of the biggest catalysts I think so far has been the pandemic. We've seen that Wales have had the devolved powers that Wales have had have helped to stave off the worst parts of the pandemic that we didn't see in England, and I think that's probably helped a lot. So we had the Welsh enforcing of the border with England. You had the continuation of stricter lockdown rules when England were relaxing theirs quite heavily. When I came back to London and visited a lot of the places I used to frequent before the lockdown, a lot of them told me they've been open since about June, when at that point, I think in Wales, cafes and pubs and stuff certainly weren't open. I think the exercise of these powers has been massively successful for Wales and has seemingly strengthened the appetite for Welsh independence. Demonstrations in support of like independent Wales have been increasing in size and frequency. I remember years ago, you'd only really see Welsh independence movements during St. David's Day marches and stuff, and now you're seeing loads of towns and cities will have their own purely independent, pro-independence marches just for that, and not tacked on to a national holiday. I think that's reflected in the numbers. Well, I've written some of the numbers down. In January 2020, so that's just before the outbreak of coronavirus, support for independent Wales stood around 21%. And then in June, when Wales was like sort of demonstrably handling the coronavirus situation better than the UK Parliament, who were de facto running England, the support for independence increased by around 4%, so to roughly a quarter of the country. And then in the most recent poll, which was released toward the end of August, it showed that around 32% of the country, so it's almost a third, would vote for independence in a referendum tomorrow. So I think, it's definitely increasing, but it's also polarizing on either end. So, obviously one of the problems is that, the referendum isn't going to be tomorrow, and there's going to be a massive propaganda campaign from the unionist side in order to play on and increase those feelings of, embarrassment from, about being Welsh. And also the fact that they might have a Devo Max strategy and all that. So, it's not likely that Wales would win an independent referendum anyway, because there is concessions and, counter propaganda, which would be so powerful. And at the same time, we've seen polarizing on either end of the referendum, on either end of the Indie Union divide. So, increase for support for increased unionism or intense unionism, which is rolling back of the CNF and of devolved powers, has also been increasing. So I think the pandemic, I think particularly polarizes debate, which makes the referendum decision, the question of having a referendum, more likely, because there's such divide on both sides. But in doing that, also creates a massive opportunity, but also massive opponent for it. So I don't know how likely it is. I think it's likely we'll get a referendum. I'm not sure how like independence is going to be.
Yeah. Someone in the chat has said, and I'm going to read this out because I just find it a bit funny. There was that one Welsh guy who tweeted that he would support the People's Republic of Kampuchea if they played England in football. Do you agree? Yes, that's the correct position, I think. And also, yes, we saw Lenin from Dan. We're big fans here. We don't have a Lenin emote yet, but okay, I'll go a question from the chat. So Jamtapot, who's a long-time viewer, so I'll do his first. As a follow-up to the Welsh independence question, how does the fact that Wales voted for Brexit intersect with a growing popularity for independence in Wales? And I'll also tack on that it's been touched on a couple of times that I'll also add on like how the Welsh government has handled the coronavirus intersected with that desire as well. So I know, Eli, you already touched on a couple of these, but if you have anything else you want to expand on, we'll go to you first, and then we'll go back round.
I think.
Oh, have we lost Eli briefly? I thought my Discord had crashed. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we can hear you. You lost. You basically crashed at the start of your answer, so you can start again.
Sorry, I've got nothing to say on the second coronavirus question that I haven't already covered.
Okay.
But what was the first question?
It was how does the fact that Wales voted for Brexit intersect with the growing popularity for independence in Wales?
Yeah, I'm not really sure actually. I think it does signify what I ended the last question with, was the polarizing of the debate. I think in many ways the Welsh decision to leave the EU, the only other constituent of the UK to do so along with England, I think signifies in many ways that Wales does see itself as a sort of younger brother of England. It sees itself as a partner with England than it does as a nation itself. So I think it intersects in it in that way. I think it intersects in it in that it signifies a lot of the unionist, a lot of the unionist constituency of Wales, and how it sees itself as being part of England than as a part of than as a nation.
I'm enjoying the chat discussing whether Jeff Bezos has ended world hunger. I'm pointing out, if you want to take money out of Jeff Bezos's pocket and give it to me, subscribe with Twitch Prime. There's my pitch. Rianne, sorry I interrupted. Please go ahead.
I guess just briefly, I think it's important to remember the Welsh vote for Brexit was really narrow, like it was elsewhere in the country. I think a lot of it was motivated by a desire for an upset, without really thinking that victory was inevitable. So you could sort of vote to spite and upset a ruling class, which is a laudable thing to do, without the risk of winning. I think that's true of the Brexit vote in general, and I think it was also true in Wales. I also know a load of people in Wales who voted Remain, and they weren't, members of the Welsh metropolitan elite or whatever. So I think all that has to be recognised. That said, I don't think that voting for independence, as in for the UK to be independent of Europe, needs to conflict with the desire for Wales to be independent of the UK. I think they're complementary in a lot of ways. Leave it there.
Okay, Morgan, it's we're back to you. So if you need me to repeat the question, just let me know. Otherwise, you can feel free to go ahead. And if you've not unmuted yourself, you should. There you go.
Yeah, could you repeat the question, please? I'm afraid.
Sure. As a follow-up to the Welsh independence question, how does the fact that Wales voted for Brexit intersect with the growing popularity for independence in Wales? And I also tacked on the coronavirus, how its response to that may have impacted growing support.
So my view, coming from this position, is that from what I can see from my own personal experience, is that currently, so far, the bulk of support for independence is coming from people who voted Remain, if not are quite passionately pro Remain. That's not a universal rule, but it's just what I've noted from my own personal experience. However, I think if we were to campaign on a platform of, say, rejoining the European Union, not only would we then lose the referendum, but I think it would also be as a policy decision. I think it would be a poor idea. With regards to how it's intersecting, it's. I think there may be some aspect where part of this growth in support has kind of been a surgence of sort of national self-esteem. So it started. I think part of it started with the Leave vote, and wanting to have more control over economic aspects, over political aspects, and then I think that was sort of like the seed of it. I think where it's really started to be fertilized is with coronavirus, and with how Wales has handled it in comparison to England. I think now people are starting to realise that Wales can very much stand on its own as a nation, and it's not just a sidekick to England.
Okay. Oh, have we lost you? Or okay, no. Okay, you did just end. Okay, good. I've just got distracted by the chat because it's constantly flashing a notification. Thank you to everyone who's gifting subs, and also Morgan for leader. Yes, I quite like Morgan. He should definitely be active in politics. I won't go beyond that. Dan, would you like to finish us off for this question?
Yeah, sure. I actually don't think the Welsh Labour government has handled coronavirus well at all. I think they've been terrible, but the narrative evolved a little bit. That people think they've handled it better than the Tories. So I guess that's all that matters. It's made people aware of devolution and devolved power in a way that hasn't previously. As to the role of Brexit, I guess it depends how we think. What was the motivating factors behind Brexit? So a lot of people obviously have interpreted it as being some sort of evidence of some latent, deep-seated unionism, and it probably is some element of that because Labourism in Wales has always been a British like unionist ideology. There's loads of other factors. I think, one, people were just really pissed off in general, and it just got targeted. The EU just became the focus of that anger. That's my relatively simplistic take on what Brexit is. And the other thing is, like, Wales doesn't have we don't have our own public sphere. We don't have our own media. Don't have distinct institutions as Scotland has. It was almost inevitable that we were going to vote for Brexit, because if people are consuming the Daily Mail and the Sun every day, which they are, which I don't know, I don't know. Obviously, people are correct to be pissed off because Wales is so poor. So I don't actually necessarily think there's a tension between like the vote for Brexit and the rise in support for Welsh independence. Both of them symbolise a desire for like substantial real substantive change and a break with the system that hasn't served Wales very well. So I don't think they are. I actually think the real problem that the Welsh independence campaign is going to run into is if it's dominated by Plaid Cymru and like pro EU liberals. Then I don't think you're going to attract a lot of people who voted to leave. So it's got to harness that like sort of anti-politics, anti-Westminster sort of populism if it wants to succeed. But I don't necessarily think their intention.
Yeah, there was actually another question that kind of followed on from that theme. And I don't want this to be entirely about Welsh independence, but it seems to be heading in that direction, despite all my attempts to try and stop it. But okay, so Modern Kennedy, I'll read this out verbatim because I find it funny. Firstly, Death to America, of course, but only in Minecraft. We can't say that in any serious capacity on here. It's a parody in Minecraft. Second, the Independence Commission Plaid setup put forward the most status quo abiding, drifting vision of independence there could be. I'm reading it verbatim. This is not my view. So I just want to be. Do you think Plaid Cymru / Adam Price will be able to step back from their ego and let Yes Cymru take the lead? And even then, is there a nebulous and increasingly blood and soil Yes Cymru is a nebulous and increasingly blood and soil Yes Cymru the best place to lead a campaign? So we'll go back to Dan, because it seemed to touch upon Plaid needing to step back and let people get on with it.
I want to touch on like the blood and soil thing first, if that's all right. So
yeah, sure, go. I read it out verbatim because I thought that was interesting and that people would want to comment on.
So I had a chat with the people from, I think it was Contacast before, and we were talking about the SNP and how they like churn out this like army of incredibly well-spoken, well-drilled, well, essentially Blairite professional politicians who are extremely eloquent and articulate or whatever, and how the SNP in the 70s worked extremely hard to sort of marginalise like the blood and soil sort of aspect of Scottish nationalism. What I think is like hilarious and amazing about Welsh nationalism is that like our lunatic fringe is like massively prominent and like in Yes Cymru and within the Welsh nationalist movement, like people who wear like oak leaf clusters to like remember Llywelyn, and I mean, I personally think I don't necessarily think they're always that much of a bad thing, because when you meet them, they're just like really nice people, but they just love Wales. They just love Wales and the Welsh language. So there's more of a chance of them lot declaring independence in Scotland because they're so less polished and professional than like the SNP. But yeah, like make a serious point. It like Plaid can't be anywhere near, in my opinion, like the independence movement, or they can't co-opt it, which obviously Adam Price will, I think, try to do, because it'll just put people off. It has to be like a broad left populist campaign. And yeah, like the independence thing that Plaid have written is obviously like incredibly centrist and like milquetoast and extremely predictable, trying to get, a business friendly Wales of like low taxes, and like Adam Price is obsessed with Ireland and how they do things over there, which is obviously a terrible example of what we wanted to aspire to. But that's why like, left-wing groups like Indod grow in and hopefully becoming more prominent within the independence debate. Because obviously, I'd imagine, regardless of the rhetoric around it and like the fact that Yes Cymru are sort of, non-partisan or whatever, or non-ideological, I'd imagine most people want to actually change Wales for the better. So I would say that most people involved are socialistic, even if they don't call themselves such. I mean, no one really wants to keep things as they are. But yeah, it's a long way to go within the Welsh independence movement to make it sort of left wing for sure.
Okay, Morgan, you're up next on my screen. If you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry,
Yeah.
my mistake. I was looking at the Twitch chat, and I had
That's
to switch
okay.
over to this.
It happens to me all the time.
Sorry, what was the question again?
Okay, the question. I'm gonna skip the preamble because it was quite long.
Yeah.
Do you think Plaid Cymru / Adam Price will be able to step back from their ego and let Yes Cymru take the lead? And even then, is there a nebulous and increasingly blood and soil Yes Cymru? Are they the best place to lead a campaign? So yeah.
So I think it's got to be I think it's got to be important that it I think it's got to be a question's got to be asked whether Yes Cymru should be the group that is actually forefront and centre in a campaign. Let's speaking hypothetically in like an independence referendum, whether they're the ones who should be forefront and centre. Because I think for the most part, you're not going to win over people who have typically voted UKIP or Conservative or something like that. You're not going to win them over to independence by and large. I think it's very much going to be the case that the pro-independence movement is going to be left-wing, if not socialistic in nature. And so I think a group that sort of proclaims like a lack of ideology beyond independence, even though they've got very legitimate reasons for doing it. They don't want to be partisan, which is fair. Just so they don't want to alienate people. That they've got very good reasons for it, and they have their place in the independence movement to bring people over from as many sides of the spectrum as possible. But with regards to how we would actually win that, I think it would need to be with courting left-wing voters, with courting socialists. And so I don't think that a pro-independence campaign that doesn't proclaim to be left-wing or right-wing is going to win. I think it will end up alienating more left-wing voters than it would win right-wing ones.
Okay. I just want to point out to the chat that try and keep the questions within the scope of the topic. I appreciate the enthusiasm, but, questions about US liberals hectoring, badgering people about Trump, not really the topic today. But I will do a US election stream probably, and I would try and keep the questions about Welsh independence to a minimum from now on because it's occupied a significant portion of our time, and there are many more interesting things we can definitely talk about, although if I'm letting you guys lead, I guess this is the interesting thing. Rian, sorry for interrupting. If you need me to repeat the question, you can ask.
No, that's fine. I've just got blood and soil written down, so I'm gonna
Oh no.
riff off that. I agree with what's been said before, that it's the focus should be on a sort of left coalition that brings in maybe things like eco-socialism, localist democracy, cooperativism, that sort of thing. I think there are. There's even things at quite a high level within the Welsh government, like the Future Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which somebody brought up on Twitter. That kind of thing is an approach that is an alternative to the sort of neoliberalism or light neoliberalism that Adam Price has gone for with Plaid. So it's possible to draw on things like that, I think. I'll finish there.
Okay. Eli, would you like to finish us off with this question?
Yeah. Well, Adam Price went to my school. I think they should. I think Plaid Cymru and Adam Price should step back from the argument, insofar as they are currently concerned about the sort of broad political, like the SNP sort of Big Ten, pro-business, centrist, wishy-washy independence movement, which they think will garner support from all ends of the sphere. I think what that does is sort of give more voice to that sort of blood and soil nationalism, as you referred to. which I think also needs to be needs to be sidelined in favour of a political argument, and that political argument needs to be, one which capitalises on the anger, I think, that we saw in the Brexit referendum, which is basically to say that one of the massive problems with Wales is that it isn't independent. It hasn't got as much powers as it should. It takes a lot of its rules from Westminster, which is dominated by Conservatives who don't care about the working class of Wales. And I think, as well as Plaid Cymru stepping back, I think we also have to say, I would argue that the Labour Party should also step back from any sort of unionist arguments that it wants to make and learn from the lessons that it was taught in Scotland. As for Yes Cymru, leading the ship. I think if we're looking at 10 years as our framework here, I think Yes Cymru are basically going to have to lead that campaign. They've basically they are the grassroots independence campaign at the moment. So I see it as likely that they will. Therefore, we should try and co-opt the Yes Cymru blood and soil arguments and turn them into political arguments for independence. Not just ones based on history and culture. And I think that's it. I think that's what I was going to say.
Okay. Well, because the question's come up essentially twice, I will ask the question because I knew this question was coming. It's even in my notes, but you've asked it so much better than me, chat. So well done. You're much better at writing questions than I am. Is Welsh Labour heading the same way as Scottish Labour? If so, what can or should be done to stop it? And I will read the second question, which is, are the Labour Party's days numbered in Wales? Which was left you a little bit less scope. But Eli, we'll come back to you. So how fucked are Welsh Labour? Basically is the question.
I mean, politically, ideologically, pretty fucked up, right? But I think it comes down at the moment, I think, to how they deal with. I mean, they're pretty fucked up anyway because they are losing a lot of ground to Plaid Cymru and the Conservatives because they, in many ways, signify that old Blair, right? Despite the fact that that Mark Drakeford, who is the Corbynite, is the leader, it still has within it an infestation of Blairites who are basically in favour of wishy-washy liberal unionism, and that doesn't excite anybody. So it's fucked on that front. I think as well, if it doesn't take, it's going to have to take, I think, a neutral position on independence. And if it doesn't take that, if it takes the same way, if it takes the same road that Scottish Labour did during their referendum in 2014 or 2015, then I think it'll meet that same fate, and we'll just see that Wales will become a Plaid Conservative heartland, which isn't good for anybody. Certainly not good for the working class, who the Labour Party also represent.
Okay, Rhian.
Not much difference from my point of view. I think Welsh Labour have this sort of unique complacency and stagnancy to them, which has been the case for as long as I've been politically conscious, to be honest. And even like under Corbyn, they still constituted this sort of Blairite managerial technocratic outpost that didn't seem to partake of sort of left populist energy or grassroots revitalisation or anything. So in conclusion, I think they're very fucked.
Okay. I like the short answers to this one. Morgan. You need to remember to unmute. There you go.
Yeah. It was me fanning about on Twitch again. So it's Welsh. So there's. I was just grabbing the link for something. I'll put it in the chat now. This I can quantify how fucked Welsh Labour is if they are not flexible on this issue. There was a poll that found that 42% of people who voted Labour in 2019 in Wales would vote for independence in a referendum. And now, even if you lost half of that base because you alienated so many people, if you were being rigidly, dogmatically unionist, if you alienated that many people, you would be seriously fucked. Even if it's just 20% of your base, you would be losing elections. So if Now there are signs that Welsh Labour might be learning the lessons of Scottish Labour. I think it was only recently that Mark Drakeford royally boiled the piss of Ian Murray by saying that he was basically of a mind of saying if the Scottish people want another indie ref, then they should have one. And Ian Murray was not happy about that at all. But that kind of signalled. He said that if there was desire for one in Wales as well, that he would be open to holding one. I don't think he'll ever get Welsh Labour to the position of they'll never ever be a pro-independence party. Like that's just never going to happen. Not Welsh Labour, but you can get them to a position where they adopt a referendum, and it would be a stupendously uphill battle to stop them from campaigning for a no vote. Or even just getting them on a free vote would be like the best thing. Just let Labour representatives campaign as they choose to. Even though no doubt, vast majority of them would campaign for no. But yeah, effectively, if Welsh Labour don't show some flexibility on this issue, if they go if they behave and play the same antics as Scottish Labour, then yeah, they are colossally fucked.
Yeah, I will just point out for the benefit of the chat that while I'm conscious that people get annoyed at the comparison between Wales and Scotland as if they're the same, I have tried my very hardest to avoid that up until now. So please don't be mad at me like what happened on Twitter that time when I suggested both streams. Anyway, sorry, Dan, please finish us off with this question.
Yeah, just to reiterate what everyone said, like I think they are fucked. And like I'm obviously personally delighted about that. I think that, as Rhian said, they're a really awful bunch. They're extremely right wing. They're reactionary. They've done nothing for Wales basically for the last 20 years. It's just been managed decline, implementation of austerity, and they're stuck. They've basically coasted by on like 45% turnout in devolved elections, and they sort of banked on the fact that no one knows what's going on essentially, and they've just snuck in. And I thought what was interesting about the Brexit vote was it showed how actually fragile hegemony actually is in Wales, because we don't know what 55% of people think about Welsh politics because they don't turn up to vote. But when the turnout sort of surged in the Brexit vote, it showed that I think Welsh Labour shat themselves and they're like, oh shit, we've got this like mass of people who could turf us out quite easily. Problem with like Drakeford and that, like this, I don't. Drakeford's been a huge disappointment. I mean, I thought he'd be crap, but he's been worse than you could possibly imagine. He's just been like continuity Darwin Jones. He's just pro-business, punching left all the time, anti-independence, anti-nationalism. I think the problem is like basically Welsh Labour have this fantastical, weird view of the British state as being like everything is permanently 1945 and Clem Attlee, and Britain is amazing, and there's just the NHS, the welfare state, and they sort of talk about that all the time. Whenever you talk about, right, we need 30% of Welsh kids are in poverty, we need to devolve welfare, and they just say, oh no, we can't do this. We need to strengthen the UK. And I think either Morgan or Eli said earlier, basically they've just got like, I don't know, they've just got this weird fantastical vision of what UK is, and they can't actually accept what is happening. They can't accept the fact there's a huge crisis happening in the British state. Increasingly, there's basically an obvious choice between Welsh independence or permanent Toryism. The other thing I think is important to note is that like the social basis that like sustained sustained Labourism as a distinct political culture identity in Wales have disappeared. Like the institutions, the miners institutions, the libraries, and all the other institutions in working class areas that were built by the early Labour movement, and the communities which sustained this like distinct political culture, they've been allowed to just slip and just completely just been allowed to disappear. And Welsh Labour have actively promoted it. They've promoted this nation of like petty bourgeois, live, laugh, love homeowners, and then they're going to be surprised then when everyone like votes Tory. It's they are absolutely fucked, basically, and they deserve to be. But the problem is that I think what might happen next year is that the Tories will win, and it's not going to do anyone any good.
Yeah, that you kind of you've cut off one of my questions there with that last bit about the Tories winning. So good job. But okay, we'll have a fun question because I think we've been talking about Welsh independence and serious things for too long. So I know Morgan's been answering this in the chat, but who is the worst Welsh political figure? We're going back to Dan. Worst Welsh political figure. Just absolutely shit on them for 2 minutes. You know.
I've got a huge list. For me, it's definitely Kinnock. Kinnock is like I don't know. I hate him so much as an individual. It's hard to know where to start. Kinnock basically set. Obviously, Kinnock is important because obviously he really laid the foundations for New Labour. So it shouldn't just be Welsh people that hated him. The fact he sold out the miners, and what I thought. I mean, he also, I think, Kinnock laid the basis for this like very Welsh Labour, like authenticrat bollocks, where they talk like, "Oh, I'm from the valleys, blah blah. I'm a real working man, not like these sort of metropolitan elitists." But obviously, at the same time, Jeremy Corbyn was getting like £3,000 a week in Islington to be sent to the South Wales miners. Neil Kinnock, who was like a professional Welshman in London, was turning his back on them. He's just a despicable human being, and he's spawned a whole. I mean, I don't know. Welsh Labour just produces these bootlicking scumbags and sellouts. George Thomas, Neil Kinnock. You've got Owen Smith, Chris Bryant. And just further back, there's just loads of these like horrible, rotten freaks that have come out of the Welsh Labour tradition. They definitely outnumber the good ones. Yeah, Kinnock for me because he's like the daddy of them all.
Oh, good. Literally the daddy of one of the worst MPs too.
Oh, yeah. What about it?
Incredibly unfortunate cursed phrase to refer to him as daddy. I'm so sorry, everyone, for that. Morgan, apologies, and worst politician in Wales. I think you gave your answer, but for the benefit of everyone.
I've actually changed my mind. Before that though, thought I'd just say that whereas Adam Price went to Eli's school, Neil Kinnock went to mine. And I can tell you personally that he is like the secret shame of the school. They don't talk about Neil Kinnock in Lewis School, Pengham. My granduncle was in school with him, and he was not fond of him. I personally would have to say Chris Bryant. Now is I did initially say Neil Hamilton, frankly, because I had the blissful moment of forgetting that Chris Bryant existed. But now it's a case that I was just looking up because I had to remind myself. I'll put this article in the chat. But not only have we seen just ridiculous, just awful shit from Chris Bryant, just repeatedly. Not only was he defending Rosie Duffield on her just disgustingly transphobic comments that she made, but there was also the thing he did the other day, which is it's just egregious. He nominated Joe Biden for a Nobel Peace Prize. This is a man who arranged false testimony in the lead up to the Iraq War. This is one of the most hawkish American politicians in the Democratic Party. So for Chris Bryant to nominate him as someone who has made outstanding contributions to peace is an utter piss take. It's yeah, and for this man to be in the position that he is, to take the positions that he does, and for especially to be of the class makeup that he is, whilst representing one of the an incredibly poor area of Britain, a poor area of Wales.
It happened. It happened at last. I knew it would happen. Sorry everyone, the technical difficulty happened that I predicted. Which is why everyone got to see the lovely technical difficulties gift that I have in the background now. Oh, we're back. Okay, sorry, Morgan. Mid-rant cut off there. I'm so sorry.
If you don't stop, if we didn't have technical difficulties, I'd be ranting about Chris Bryant all night, so that's fine.
Okay.
For him to be of the class makeup that he has, to be owning penthouses in London, whilst people in the Rhondda are struggling. He cannot represent the people of the Rhondda. Not in any way that is accurate to the needs, to the class interests of the people of the Rhondda. And I'll stop there because otherwise I'll never stop.
The chat saying that Morgan had too much passion. That's right. Discord could not handle it, and so unfortunately, you had to see the technical difficulties gif. Okay, Rhian, the worst Welsh politician.
I'm going to second Kinnock or third Kinnock, whoever we are now, partly because I'm from the same town as Kinnock. I'm also from the same town as an Iron Bevan, which I think is pretty good. But then I remember that I'm from the same town as Kinnock, so he cancels out Bevan, I think, and leaves me with a sort of no-score draw. Aside from Kinnock, though, I'm also going to second Neil Hamilton, mostly because I've got really happy memories of 97 election, I think, of him losing his seat. And I thought, great, I'll never have to see his face again. But no, I do. Very briefly, the guy is corrupt, sleazy, cronyist. As a student, he was a neo-fascist, and he's still broadly one now. Left the Tories and joined UKIP. I'm going to finish with a reply he made in the Senate to Ellen Ed Morgan when she said the economic consequences of Brexit would be hardest for those who could least afford it. Neil Hamilton came back with, will suicide's an option?
Oof.
So no. Fuck him.
Yeah,
he gets my vote.
There it is. Okay. I hard agree so far, even though they've all named fantastic candidates. I think Neil Hamilton's the winner so far for that alone. Eli, worst Welsh politician.
Neil Hamilton also went to my school, actually. Don't have a very good track record. Do you know what? I'll say, just because no one else has said it, and I think a lot of people in Wales would agree, I'm going to say Carwyn Jones. One of the most sort of depraved political leaders of a left-wing party going, capitalised on low turnout, as Dan said, used that in order to prop up, the right wing of the Welsh Labour Party, which he's awfully been very fucking good at. Horrible, depraved leader of the country who, in many ways, I think is instrumental in one of the reasons why Wales is so fucked. Wales is so fucked, and why Welsh Labour is so fucked as well. Turned his back, really, or symbolises, I think, the turn in Wales and in the UK and the Labour Party from a socialist, progressive party into one which was, one which is in terminal decline, and is managerial and is only concerned about sort of technocratically managing the decline of the UK and of Wales. I think he's instrumental in that.
Okay. Just to maybe lighten the mood a little bit, following that, who's the best Welsh politician or political figure I'll throw in? Because then I can say you can't say yourselves. You can't say yourselves, unfortunately. Eli, best Welsh politician or political figure?
Morgan Paulette. No, I'll say an Iron. Actually, do you know what? Is that a politician or can I say a political figure?
Either or, let's say.
I'll say a political figure just because I can name my hometown Ammanford's got a fantastic pub called the Pick and Shovel, which was started by miners using their own money and money from the cooperative movement in order for the working people of Ammanford to have a place to drink away from depraved petty bourgeois individuals. And one of the people who started that was a man called Sammy Morris, who was a member of the, I think he might be a member of the Communist Party. He was definitely a member of the National Union of Mine Workers, or what was then the South Wales Federation, Fed. Saron branch secretary, went off to fight in Catalonia with the International Brigade Against Fascism, was injured there, said that he wouldn't return until he was dead or international fascism was defeated, and unfortunately did die there. Martyr for the cause and a symbol of internationalist Welsh anti-fascist socialism.
Okay, Rhian, best Welsh politician. I'm saying that you can choose anyone living or not, just, best one.
There's honestly too many to mention, to be honest with you, but I'm going to go for Leanne Wood, just as a sort of a still a serving politician. Even though like her party is not my own, her commitment to her party was such that she was a Valleys girl, but she learned Welsh in order to represent part of the tendency of her party. She is staunchly anti-fascist at a time when we need that, including in Welsh politics. And in the leaders' debates in the election before last, she was just about the only person to actually call out Nigel Farage in the way he deserved. And I just think she's great.
Okay. Morgan, you were asking in the chat, so I assume you have a person in mind already.
Yeah, I'm gonna. Whereas other people in this stream are making efforts to be original, I'm going to be incredibly basic, and I'm going to say Aneurin Bevan. Not just because of the NHS, but because of how he established it as well. Not only did he put Winston Churchill in his place when the British Medical Association were comparing him to Hitler only 2 years after Hitler had topped himself in his bunker, and they were making these comparisons. He pushed ahead with this, informed by his own experiences as a young man growing up in poverty in Tredegar, to be informed of that class makeup like that, and then go on to make such positive, permanent, lasting change is, I don't think it can be measured, the good that Aneurin Bevan achieved. I can't praise him enough, and I'd be, I'm sure everyone agrees as well. Like, for whatever faults he had, the establishment of the NHS has been probably, I'd say, like, off the top of my head, the most positive impact in British politics since the end of the Second World War.
Okay. It's an incredibly basic answer, but an important one, I think, that we all hear it. Dan, finish us off. Best Welsh political figure.
Well, I guess you could go through any of the communists that went to fight in the Spanish Civil War, like Tom Spain and a bunch of others who were obviously, that's like a heroic tradition. For me, he's not a politician, but Gwynalf Williams, a historian, is probably the most inspirational Welsh figure in my life. He was, communist, incredibly amazing, popular educator. He translated Gramsci into Italian, translated Gramsci from Italian into English, before anyone else had really touched on his work. He spoke, fluent Spanish. He was a committed Republican and a Marxist, and just an all-round, did a huge amount to write the history of Wales, but also popularize it. And if you've got a chance, YouTube and watch The Dragon Has Two Tongues to see like Alf Williams and how sort of charismatic he was. I think the Fast Show like parodied him. They did like this Welsh historian, like fiery Welsh historian character. Fairly sure that was based on Gwynalf. But yeah, for me, Gwynalf Williams.
Okay. I guess it's kind of a question. It's a question that I picked up from someone. But I guess the question is, if you were running the SNF, what one policy would you implement? So basically, what is the one policy that you would implement if you were King of Wales, which we all know I was in the CK Free Stream, and I extended its borders to its rightful Greater Wales status. Dan, what is the one policy?
There's a bunch of, like classic politician answer. There's a bunch of them. If you read latest Eric Olin Wright book about eroding capitalism and like how gradually you can introduce very like seemingly moderate policies that'll actually make concrete changes. There are a bunch of them I've been thinking in Wales that we could implement. For example, full proportional representation. But I think the main one for me at the moment would be full devolution of broadcasting, because it's such a moderate aim, but without a public sphere and without like without a national conversation in Wales, nothing's going to improve. So yeah, that would be the one thing I would do.
Okay. As someone has put in the chat, enforce Valley's accents as a new RP. I'll leave that one out for everyone to enjoy. Morgan, the one policy.
Well, to me, it's a fairly obvious policy of what we should implement. It's you move the location of the Senedd to Blisters Bargoed, and you move the location of Blisters Bargoed to the Senedd, and you make Tina Sparkles the new Llywydd. No, in all seriousness, I don't know if you could dismantle capitalism in one policy, but I think it would have to be a toss-up either between universal basic services, which I realise is not one policy, but I'm cheating and I'm calling it that, or more nationalisation of the commanding heights of the economy.
Okay, you're allowed to cheat in your answer. If it's a category, I'll let it go because, I'm in charge. I can let these things go or not as I see fit. This is the dictatorship of Sinan, after all. Rian, what is your one big policy, the one weird trick?
Okay, well, I'm going to cheat by saying I would vote for everything that's been mentioned previously. The one thing I would institute is bring in a curriculum that looks at Welsh history, by which I don't mean not with a nationalist slant, but just look at the amazing broad sweep of the way the country has developed and some of the amazing radical moments, amazing protest movements that have been part of our history, because I think that's something we should know about and be aware of and let it inspire how we live today.
Okay. Eli, I think you're the last one. So what is the one weird trick?
I don't like. I might not even do a trick. I think I would push the immediate revitalisation of the old railways in Wales, so that if I wanted to go from, which I think should be nationalised as well, I can put one trick, be run by Arriva Trains or whatever the fuck again. The immediate revitalisation of the old railway networks, so that if I wanted to go from Ystrad to Wrexham, I wouldn't have to. If I wanted to go from Ystrad to Wrexham, I wouldn't have to go through England, and that Wales could have its own proper system of railways, and not this one now where you can get from Swansea maybe to Cardiff fairly quickly. Then you can't even go from Swansea to Aberystwyth without having to go all the way around England and North Wales and then down again.
Okay. As someone has pointed out in the chat that abolishing the state is one policy. Yes, but it's kind of not in the spirit of the question. And they've all been good sports, so they have abided by the spirit of the question. I'm trying to see where the question was that I wanted to ask, because I don't want to do this question because I feel like we're going to be making fun of people, but Sapphite has asked it and she is a mod, and so I will do that. Please talk about the uniquely fucked vibe of the Welsh Tory. So I don't know, is there a fucked vibe with Welsh Tories? This will probably be the last one before we wrap up, because I've kept them a little bit longer than I planned to. But Eli, what is this fucked vibe I'm apparently being told to talk about?
Oh, they are pretty fucked. They're properly fucked. I'm not sure how many of them are actually Welsh, though. Most of the Welsh Tory voters I've met have just been prescription Tories. But yeah, there is a sort of uniquely fucked vibe to the, it's to the Welsh Tory. There's the Welsh Unionist Tories. So sort of more than a fucked, it's a bit of a cucked vibe as well. Sort of really weird people. I don't know, more than your regular Tory.
It's impressive, because if you ever see English Tories, I mean, my God. Rian, I appreciate it's not a serious question, but
No worries. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't think I know any Welsh Tories. I would imagine you have to be quite an odd person to be both Welsh and a Tory. So I'm going to presume that plays out in their character, their psychology, and their general approach to life. I look forward to meeting one, though. To be honest, they sound fascinating.
I don't know if I'm looking forward to it or if I'm worried, but Morgan, go on. Describe the vibe for us, because as we know, politics is all vibes these days. So
it's fucking cursed. It's a case. I've never met a group of people more enthusiastic about the taste of boot leather in my life. They're just an absolutely bizarre group of people. Especially I remember when I was in the UCL debate for general election last Christmas, and there was a couple of Welsh Tories in the crowd, and it was a case of, and they lived like they came from really near where I live, in Australia, and I don't know what has to go wrong for you to grow up in an environment in the valleys, see the desolation caused by Thatcher and close to 40 years of neoliberal policies, and go, oh yeah, this is a good idea. We should keep this up. This is working well for us. Yeah.
Someone has suggested in the chat that Welsh Tories are always either deep-throating boot or ex-mine owners. Dan, is that true? Is that why the vibe is so fucked?
I'm from like a Tory stronghold called Porthcawl, so I like know loads of Tories, and it's always been a Tory vote in town, and it's sort of been ostracised within the borough because it's in Bridgend, which is Labour. Well, actually, Bridgend went Tory in the last election. I don't know if they're like uniquely terrible, although like Alan Cairns is like, how do you describe him? I mean, he's like his aide actively disrupted a rape trial. He didn't fire him. What else has he done? Cairns. He's taken on like a second job at the moment, and he's just he is like a uniquely bootlicking little troll who's just happy to be in the limelight, Cairns. But like loads of the Welsh Tories I know are just like what I would say, Essex man or Mondeo man, just the petty bourgeois. They want to let landlords, they want to get rich. So like new money Tories, which is like, arguably worse than like weird sort of old Jacob Rees-Mogg sort of aristocrat Tories. I don't know. I seem to hate them more because they're sort of more adjacent to fascism, I think. They're all fucking scum, aren't they? So I don't tend to make a distinction between like the Welsh ones and the English ones, but maybe it's about property relations.
Okay, so they're all scum anyway. So there you go. I think that will be our last question because I've kept everyone a little bit longer than I'd planned because of the technical difficulties earlier. But if you've enjoyed this, follow and subscribe because I like that when that happens because then I have money for food. But I'm going to let each of the guests say goodbye to you and plug anything they have to plug because I know Dan will have something. So Dan, say goodbye to the chat.
I wanted to say thanks to everyone for tuning in. I've only just like now managed to get the chat up, so I haven't had a clue what's going on. And my mate has been smoking weed and distracting me throughout. But thank you very much for everyone for turning up. And I just noticed in the chat, someone's mentioned Simon Calder, the travel writer who said visit Wales on holiday. He got like dogs abuse to the point he said he's never going to Wales ever again. So last night we were like smoking weed, and someone commented to Simon Calder. He says he looks like the head from Art Attack. And if you fucking Google Simon Calder, it's just I don't know. It's just I don't know why, but it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Like he just look once you see it, you can't unsee it. So that's the only thing I would plug it. Well, yeah, listen to my podcast if you don't already. We've got some like really good episodes, like guests on. But yeah, mainly just Google Simon Calder and think about the that head from Art Attack. But yeah, thanks for tuning in and thanks for having me. It's been great.
No worries. Rian.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really enjoyed this evening. I've written a couple of books. I should probably have said that at the start, but I have. Some of them are about Welsh stuff. Please buy them. Got a new book out next year about community wealth building and democratic localism, which also mentions Wales. But mostly, yeah, and I've really enjoyed this, and hope everyone has a good evening. Thank you.
Yeah, this is why we do 2 introductions basically to the chat, just in case anyone forgets anything. Morgan, say goodbye to chat and anything you want to plug or talk about.
Well, thank you very much for everyone for tuning in. I hope we've all been entertaining for the chat and for the people listening. I don't really have anything to plug. I see a mod has already plugged my personal Twitter. If you'd like, you're more than welcome to follow me on my other one if you want. It's at @hasbezosdecided. Yeah, feel free to follow me on either one. Those are the only things.
Okay, and Eli, if you want to say bye to the chat and anything that you want to plug. Oh God, the question that just got asked is terrifying. Eli, if you've muted yourself and forgotten to unmute yourself, you should unmute yourself. And also, yes, the head from Art Attack does fuck. I'm sorry to tell everyone. That's that's the answer. Eli, you there? Or are you not there? I don't know what's If you've not unmuted yourself, you need to unmute yourself. Otherwise, I'm gonna wrap it up here and say goodbye to the chat. So I think we might have to wrap it up there. But you've got Eli's link in the chat. Otherwise, it's good night from me. You can catch me on Sunday, where I will be streaming. What am I streaming on Sunday? Let's have a look. I'm streaming Fall Guys, apparently. I didn't realize that. I had to look in my calendar. I think it will be season 2, so catch me then between 1 and 4. Otherwise, just follow me on Twitter to find out when I'm doing these things. And good night, and I'll see you all soon.